Cool. How are your thumbs after playing that? Are they throbbing right now?
That's fine.
He says they're all right.
So first and foremost, I think the fact that your headspace in regards to the game length is very much smart and in line with how people play iOS games. The fact that first and foremost you made it a wave-based mode is really, really smart, as opposed to an endless Geometry Wars type of grind. I think that's really, really smart. 3 to 5 minutes, obviously you get the time period. It's the proverbial bus ride that we all talk about, and that's really, really good. One minor thing is, and this is something I've learned myself over the years, so I'm still learning as I work through this, is when you present me with this cool looking environment and I have a sword and I'm ready to go and there's creatures and then boom, wall of text. The first thing I'm going to do is just be like, get that out of here. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with that, right? Even just there's a reason why the Star Wars scroll worked, because it wasn't like there's a scroll going on in front of like a first person, showing blasters and lightsabers, because it's like, hey, this is just an obstacle to get through to that. So consider presenting the fiction maybe in a slightly different way as opposed to the big brick, because I want to interact. I don't want to read, right? Let's see my big thing I mentioned earlier, and I teased you about a little bit, and I had mentioned at the PAX East thing, is the dual analog simulation. I don't think it's black and white that it can't work at all in every instance. I think there's instances where it could work. For example, if you're keeping exploration to kind of a minimum, just for 10 or 12 seconds, I'm just kind of poking around and looking around using kind of the dual analog simulation. That's cool. My biggest concern right now with the current combat mechanic is that it feels very much like Skyrim, that you can't really pause and even change your strategy with. So you don't have your traditional Xbox or PlayStation controller, you have an iOS touchscreen, and you don't have the ability to kind of pause and assess like how you're going to shift your strategy yet. And that's a concern of mine from the kind of core combat loop. You may want to play around with tap and go. I don't know if that's right for you. One thing that you may want to consider is making it kind of an advanced feature to have to deal with more than one enemy at once. For the first few waves at least, consider the player freely exploring, and then once he engages with an enemy, then the game shifts into its own combat mode, where then you're timing, kind of like a light Infinity Blade. I hate to go back to it, but I do believe that Donald and Jeremy did such a great job with kind of cracking the iOS control scheme. So then you're focused on, the timing of your swipes of your swords and your parries and things like that, and doing magic spells and things like that. Maybe even allowing you to, if you tap to the sides of the screen, you can kind of pivot around the enemy kind of 3D fighter style to kind of stab in the back, which is something Infinity Blade didn't even do, and kind of get that combat system a little bit better before you kind of pop over to the overwhelming. My friend Tom Bissell, who's a writer, referred to Skyrim as you're backing up and bringing a plane in with two axes kind of gameplay, which managing that kind of combat and managing navigation on the iOS screen, especially on iPhone, can get very overwhelming very quick. And never mind that what you're seeing usually is this, right? It's the two thumbs covering your entire screen. So something to keep in mind. I like the idea of the souls, and the souls as your score. It sounds like you're working into some sort of enchanting mechanic, which is great. But for future reference, I would just back off that and try to just get good, core, crunchy, medievalish type combat with cool waves first before you kind of get into those deeper types of systems. Let's see, Skyrim, got that. And again, get back to the cadence of battle, of the kind of core of the core of the core, so that what's there you can kind of go and continue upon it before you start getting into everything else. And we in the business sometimes refer to it as walk before you can run. In Gears, that would have been nailing cover before we start dealing with horde mode or multiplayer. Nail the chainsaw and some of the kills before we start getting into the XP systems. We start getting into some of the unlockables there. So that's kind of my main advice. It looks really hard right now, but it's very promising.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.